During a high-level UN summit in New York, a young American soldier assigned to diplomatic security becomes the center of an international storm when he refuses to salute Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the revolutionary leader of Burkina Faso. The incident is caught on camera and goes viral. As pressure mounts from media, military superiors, and political factions, the soldier's motives, personal struggles, and hidden trauma come to light, alongside Traoré's own complex legacy as a leader fighting for post-colonial African sovereignty. When former President Donald Trump publicly reacts in an unexpected way, it forces a global conversation on loyalty, race, power, and integrity. A story rooted in emotional truth, political tension, and the humanity behind global headlines. The early morning air in Manhattan buzzed with anticipation. Police barricades lined First Avenue outside the United Nations headquarters. Security teams moved with rigid precision. Helicopters hovered quietly above the skyline. A cavalcade of black SUVs rolled slowly toward the east entrance. Private First Class Ethan Cole stood perfectly still, his uniform pressed, boots polished, posture flawless. He was posted just outside the UN security perimeter, assigned to an international detail supporting dignitary protection. Ethan had served 2 tours overseas and was known among his peers for being disciplined, observant, and quiet. Across the avenue, protesters held flags and signs. Some hailed global unity, others condemned imperialism. New York, as always, was a noisy paradox. Inside the second SUV, Captain Ibrahim Traoré adjusted the collar of his dark olive uniform. Just 36, Traoré was not just the interim president of Burkina Faso, he was a symbol. Since leading a military transition that ousted French influence, he had become a figurehead for a rising wave of African sovereignty. His charisma, his defiance, and his youth made him a global curiosity, and a polarizing one. As the door opened and Traoré stepped out, a murmur spread through the crowd. Cameras flashed. News outlets jockeyed for angles. His security detail formed a protective ring, but his presence was calm, centered. Ethan watched as Traoré approached. Protocol was simple. All personnel on diplomatic security were expected to render appropriate honors to heads of state, whether by salute, nod, or verbal acknowledgement, depending on rank and occasion. As Traoré passed directly in front of Ethan, the captain's eyes caught his for a brief moment. Ethan didn't move. No salute, no nod. Just silence. The moment was fleeting, only a second or two. But in the age of smartphones, that's all it took. A journalist across the barrier caught the exchange on a vertical clip. The soldier, expression unreadable. The president, gaze steady. The stillness. A whisper ran through the observers nearby. One of the UN staffers turned his head in quiet disbelief. A member of Traoré's delegation raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Traoré kept walking. Ethan stood frozen. Not from fear, not from defiance, but from something deeper and older. 20 minutes later, as Traoré entered the UN building and was welcomed by General Assembly officials, the clip had already hit Twitter. American soldier refuses to salute African president. Within the hour, the hashtags began to trend. Amern salute or stand down, Ibrahim Traoré moment, Arodincho Ethan Cole. Ethan hadn't looked at his phone. He wouldn't until much later. He simply remained at his post, eyes forward, unaware that a storm had just begun, and that he was at its center. By noon, the 15-second video had already amassed over 3 million views across platforms. On TikTok, the clip was set to dramatic orchestral music. On X, formerly Twitter, it had ignited fierce debates. News anchors spoke with urgency, as if the moment marked a historic fracture. At the military base in Fort Hamilton, Brooklyn, Ethan Cole was quietly pulled from his post. Two officers from the Army's Public Affairs and Security Division escorted him into an unmarked room with gray walls and no windows. Inside, the atmosphere was sterile. A camera sat on a tripod. A military lawyer sat in the corner, silent. At the center of the room stood Colonel Richard Hale, Ethan's superior, an old-school officer with cold eyes and a trimmed mustache. "Do you understand what's happening out there, soldier?" Hale asked, pressing play on a tablet. Ethan remained silent as the video played. He watched himself stand still, unflinching. Then, the freeze frame. Traoré's eyes. His own. "This isn't a minor breach of protocol, Cole," Hale continued. "You just became an international headline." Ethan spoke for the first time. "I didn't mean to make a scene, sir." "You didn't say anything, but your silence screamed." Outside the room, a spokesperson from the Department of Defense drafted a statement. The White House was already fielding press inquiries. International media outlets from Paris to Lagos were dissecting the video frame by frame. Was it? Was it personal? Was it racist? The speculation snowballed. Some American conservatives lauded Ethan's stance, calling it an act of sovereignty. Progressives accused him of disrespecting an African leader advocating for freedom from Western dominance. African activists shared the clip under hashtags like #modern colonialism and #dignity denied. Burkina Faso's national television briefly played the video, but offered no comment, waiting to see how Traoré would respond. That night, Ethan sat in a barracks dormitory, his phone finally charged. Messages flooded in. His mother left a voicemail. "Ethan, I saw the news. I know you're hurting. Please call me." An old Army friend texted, "You okay, man? You're everywhere. You need to talk to someone?" And one message stood out. Simple, anonymous, typed in French. "You didn't dishonor him. You revealed us all." The soldier didn't sleep that night. Across the ocean, in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré watched the same clip in silence. His expression was unreadable. No aides in the room. Just him. And a moment that now belonged to the world. Meanwhile, Traoré remained unfazed by the frenzy. In his private hotel suite on the Upper East Side, he met with his core advisors. When his communications chief offered a list of talking points to lean into the moral victory, Traoré simply replied, "No. Let the moment breathe." He was no stranger to weaponized media. Back home, he had walked a political tightrope, balancing Pan-African pride, anti-colonial rhetoric, and real-world instability. But here, in New York, he didn't need a stage. The moment spoke for itself. Later that night, he gave a private interview to an African-owned media network. "Young men like that soldier," he said quietly, "often carry more than uniforms. They carry legacies, wounds, and questions no one dares to ask. I will not add weight to their silence." The interviewer was stunned. "But you were disrespected." "Perhaps," Traoré said, "or perhaps I was invited to listen." Back in Fort Hamilton, Ethan sat alone in a small chapel on base, the sound of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He hadn't spoken to anyone since seeing the press conference. No press, no superiors. He simply sat in the pews, eyes fixed on nothing. A chaplain passed behind him and paused, sensing the weight of the moment. "You're not the first soldier to act on something he didn't fully understand until later," the chaplain said. "But you might be one of the few who's being watched by the whole world while he figures it out." Ethan didn't respond, but the walls around his silence had begun to crack. And in the streets of Dakar, Brooklyn, and Ouagadougou, people began asking not, "What did he mean?" but rather, "What have we missed?" 3 days after the video of Ethan Cole refusing to salute went viral, the media narrative fractured into polarized factions. Talk shows, political commentators, military veterans, and influencers each tried to claim the moment as their own. But no one expected the next wave to come from Mar-a-Lago. At a rally in Tampa, Florida, former President Donald J. Trump took the stage before a packed crowd of supporters. The American flag billowed behind him, chants of "USA, USA" echoing through the air. He had been silent on the Ethan Cole situation until now. "So," Trump began, pausing for effect, "I hear we've got a soldier. Young guy, American. Didn't salute some African leader at the UN, right?" The crowd murmured. "Now listen. They're trying to cancel this kid. They're saying he's racist, insubordinate, anti-diplomatic. Who knows what else?" He leaned forward slightly, gripping the podium. "But you know what I think? I think this is what freedom looks like." A cheer rippled through the audience. In America, we don't salute people because we're told to. We salute because we mean it. That's the difference between dictatorships and democracies. And sometimes, just sometimes, we have to ask why people act the way they do before we rush to judge them. The reaction was instant and chaotic. Online response. On right-wing platforms, clips of Trump's speech exploded. Headlines praised him for defending the soldier. Conservative podcasts claimed Trump had restored dignity to the armed forces. Some even called Ethan a silent hero. But the left wasn't silent either. Progressive journalists criticized Trump's framing, accusing him of hijacking a nuanced situation for political gain. Civil rights leaders pointed out that Traoré had shown far more grace and humility than most Western leaders would have. Others feared Trump was using Ethan as a pawn, but buried beneath the noise was something new, a shift in tone. Instead of just arguing about Ethan's actions, people were starting to talk about his reasons. The conversation moved from the salute to the soul. Private reaction. Traoré. Back in his suite, President Ibrahim Traoré watched the Trump clip on a small tablet. He listened without emotion, though one of his aides sighed in disapproval. "He twisted the story," the aide muttered, "made it about himself." Traoré turned to him calmly. "Everyone makes everything about themselves. That's politics." He paused. "But perhaps now, people will finally stop asking what happened and start asking why." Private reaction. Ethan sat on a bench in Prospect Park, hood pulled over his head, unshaven and quiet. The city buzzed around him, oblivious. A stranger sat beside him and pulled up the Trump clip on his phone. Ethan listened to the speech from a distance, not knowing how to feel. For the first time, someone had publicly defended him, yet it didn't sit quite right. Trump had spoken of patriotism, of principle, of performance. But Ethan hadn't been making a statement. He had been mourning. And that part, the real part, still hadn't been heard. Headline the next day, the New York Times. Trump's unexpected defense of Soldier sparks global debate on honor, trauma, and identity.